I drove through a relentless rainstorm for 9 hours, my knees aching with arthritis, a homemade carrot cake nestled on the passenger seat. The cake was my surprise for Laurel's 50th birthday, the one I had planned for weeks. But when I stepped through the door, soaked to the bone, the sound of laughter hit me from the kitchen. God, I hope she crashes, I heard Laurel's voice, sharp and clear. Her husband chimed in, or at least get lost. A weekend without the guilt trips would be nice. They laughed. I stood frozen, cake in hand, and left it on the counter, feeling the weight of their words cut deeper than the rain soaking through my coat. 9 days later, I made a decision I should have made years ago. I changed my will. 3 weeks after that, they were left bewildered, trying to figure out why their credit cards wouldn't work. At 78, I realized that sometimes revenge is best served cold and with financial consequences. But before we dive deeper, make sure you subscribe for more stories that reflect the silent strength we all carry. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. My name is Bertie Matt, a widow of 12 years, a cancer survivor, a retired librarian who still alphabetizes her spice rack. After Harold passed, I stayed in our 2-story colonial in Millbrook because the memories felt like company. I lived alone, his old cardigan still hanging on the bedroom door, and the garden he had planted was now thriving under my watchful care. My relationship with Laurel, my only child, had been slowly unraveling for years, though I pretended not to see it. Our weekly phone calls grew shorter. Her tone tightened whenever I suggested visiting. Their excuses were endless. Work commitments, house renovations, social obligations that somehow never seemed to include me. Last Christmas, they went to Barbados instead of coming home. Work's been crazy, Ken explained, while their Instagram showed sunny beaches and sunset cruises. I blamed myself. Too needy, too melancholic. I was the grieving widow, forever stuck in the past. But I kept sending care packages, homemade cookies, hand-knit scarves, bigger birthday checks as my desperation for their attention grew. I became the grandmother who waited by the phone, saving newspaper clippings they'd never read. What I didn't realize, what no mother could ever imagine, was how completely they had monetized my love. The credit cards I guaranteed for their kitchen renovation. The loans I signed for their first home that somehow ballooned into a 4-bedroom Tudor with a heated pool. The beach house down payment I helped secure, while they told me they couldn't afford plane tickets to visit me for my birthday. The rain falls differently now, not as something to endure, but as a reminder that even the heaviest storms eventually clear. And when the financial house of cards I'd helped build for them began to collapse, when their meticulously crafted lives started to unravel without my silent support, I learned something important. Strength isn't about what you survive, but what you finally refuse to accept. That was when I learned to stop being the doormat and started being the storm. The cake I made for Laurel took 2 days of work. 3 layers of rich carrot cake, topped with cream cheese frosting, adorned with tiny marzipan carrots that I painstakingly shaped with fingers that didn't bend like they used to. Each carrot took nearly 10 minutes to make, rolling the marzipan, pinching the ends to a point, and adding the delicate green stems. I made 24 of them, arranged in a circle on top, like a small garden. It was the last time I would go out of my way for them. Laurel had always loved carrot cake since she was 7 years old, the year she boldly declared at her birthday party that chocolate cake was too obvious. On baking days, I'd rise before dawn, the kitchen still dark and quiet, with butter softened and carrots grated until my wrist ached. The recipe was my mother's, refined over decades, with extra cinnamon and a subtle touch of nutmeg. Harold used to sneak fingerfuls of frosting when he thought I wasn't looking. I pretended not to notice. "You're driving all that way alone?" Theda asked when I told her my plan. She stood on her side of the hedge, which separated our driveways, her secretary in hand, gray curls escaping from beneath her gardening hat. We'd been neighbors for 32 years, ever since she moved in after her divorce. She'd watched Laurel grow up, helped me care for Harold during his final months, and brought me casseroles when cancer had left me too weak to cook. "It's not the Oregon Trail, Theda. I'm taking the interstate," I replied, trying to brush off her concern. "Not the point, Bertie," she countered. "The weather report says heavy rain all the way to Connecticut. And your knees." I paused, carefully placing the cake carrier in the trunk, nestled between two pillows to keep it from sliding. My niece and I have come to an understanding, I said, trying to sound lighthearted. They complain and I ignore them, I added. Theta simply sighed, the way she always did when she knew arguing was pointless. At least take your cell phone and call me when you get there. Yes, mother, I teased, though we were the same age. Someone has to look out for you, she muttered, turning back to her roses. As I waved goodbye, I left at 4:30 a.m., my overnight bag packed with my good cardigan and the lavender hand cream Laurel used to love when she was small. A thermos of coffee sat beside me, still steaming, filling the car with the rich scent of French roast and the cinnamon I'd sprinkled on top. The radio played softly, an oldie station the kind Harold and I used to dance to in our kitchen. The rain began just outside of Millbrook, fat drops splattering against the windshield, like the beginning of a confession. By the time I reached the state line, the rain had turned into a relentless downpour that reduced visibility to nothing but the red tail lights of the car ahead. My windshield wipers struggled to keep pace, squeaking in rhythm with the throbbing pain in my knees. You should have listened to Theta, I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. My fingers were already stiffening, the arthritis worse in the damp weather. But I kept driving. 9 hours stretched ahead of me, a test of will. But what was a little rain and pain compared to the surprise on Laurel's face when I appeared at her door? I imagined it as I drove, her eyes widening, her hands flying to her mouth, that little girl's squeal escaping her lips in pure delight. Mom, what are you doing here? And then the hug, the warm, genuine embrace I hadn't felt in longer than I cared to admit. The highway stretched before me, a river of asphalt disappearing into the sheets of rain. Trucks sprayed walls of water as they passed, momentarily blinding me. I slowed to 55, then 50, hunched forward as if those extra inches might somehow improve my visibility. The cake, nestled safely in its carrier, sat beside me on the passenger seat, my physical manifestation of love and hope. At a rest stop in Massachusetts, I eased myself out of the car, wincing as my knees protested the movement. Inside the brightly lit building, I stood in the bathroom, massaging icy hot cream into my joints, the medicinal scent mixing unpleasantly with the industrial air freshener. A bathroom attendant watched me with concerned eyes. Long drive ahead, she asked, handing me a paper towel. About halfway there, I replied, attempting a smile, though I was certain it probably looked more like a grimace. The weather's supposed to get worse, she said, her voice tinged with concern. You might want to wait it out. But waiting wasn't an option. Birthdays don't postpone themselves, and I had timed my arrival for just before the dinner Laurel had mentioned planning with a few friends. I hadn't told her I was coming, hadn't spoken to her at all in the 3 days since I made the decision to drive. The surprise was essential. It would cut through the formality that had crept into our relationship, bypass the carefully arranged schedules and time constraints that had defined our recent visits. Back on the road, I cranked up the heat to fight the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The dashboard clock blinked 9:47 a.m., 5 more hours. Assuming the weather didn't slow me further, I popped an ibuprofen dry, grimacing at the bitterness. To distract myself from the pain, my thoughts wandered to earlier birthdays. Laurel at 6, her face glowing with joy as she unwrapped the dollhouse I'd spent months furnishing, complete with tiny hand-sewn curtains and little picture frames filled with family photos. Laurel at 12, blowing out candles on a chocolate cake shaped like a stack of books. Her Nancy Drew phase was in full swing, the mystery she devoured making her feel like an adult. Laurel at 16, pretending the necklace I had saved for months to buy wasn't exactly what she wanted, only to wear it every day for the next 2 years. When had things changed? When had my calls become interruptions, my visits obligations? My presence, somewhere between inconvenience and embarrassment. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Perhaps it was after Harold died, when grief made me more needy than I had ever been. Or maybe it was when she married Kent, whose family's vacation home and country club membership made my modest colonial seem quaint rather than cozy. Or maybe it was when I got sick, and the thought of having to care for me began to hover over her carefully curated life like an unwelcome specter. The rain grew heavier as I crossed into Connecticut, the relentless drumming on the roof like impatient fingers tapping. A truck jackknifed ahead, forcing traffic to crawl around the emergency vehicles with their flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement. My GPS recalculated, adding 45 minutes to my arrival time. By early afternoon, my body was a symphony of complaints, lower back spasming, neck stiff, knees radiating pain despite the medication. But determination is its own kind of painkiller. I'd driven through blizzards to get Laurel to dance recitals. I'd navigated flooded roads to attend her college graduation. A little rainstorm and arthritis wouldn't stop me now. The suburbs of Hartford appeared through the rain like a mirage. Familiar street names on exit signs reassured me that I was nearly there. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Lipstick faded, hair flattened on one side from leaning against the window. No matter, I'd freshen up before I presented myself. As I turned into Laurel subdivision, the rain lightened for a brief moment, as if offering me a moment of clarity. The houses stood proud and separate, each with manicured lawns despite the weather. Laurel's Tudor, the largest on the cul-de-sac, glowed warm against the darkening afternoon. Through the front window, I saw movement, shadows passing back and forth. Birthday preparations, I assumed, for a party I hadn't been invited to. I parked across the street, not in their driveway. Part of the surprise. Carefully, I lifted the cake carrier, double-checking that the marzipan carrots were intact, and stepped out into the rain. The walk to their front door was only 20 feet, but by the time I reached it, my raincoat was soaked through, water trickling down my neck and into my sensible shoes. I didn't ring the bell. The door was unlocked, as it always was when they were expecting company. Birthday company, just not me. I stepped into the entryway, water pooling beneath my shoes. The air was thick with the smell of rosemary and garlic, something roasting in the oven that reminded me of the dinner parties Laurel and Kent used to host for their friends, gatherings I hadn't been invited to in years. Their home was a shrine to meticulous curation. The antique console table, worth more than my first car. The abstract paintings Laurel swore were valuable, despite looking like a child's finger paintings. And the family photos, carefully arranged, yet not a single one included me. The marble floors in the foyer gleamed beneath the recessed lighting, cool and pristine, contrasting sharply with the wet footprints I left behind. I paused, uncertain. Should I call out? Announce my presence? The cake felt heavy in my arms, its weight more symbolic than literal, the weight of expectations pressing down on me, more burdensome than the 3 layers of cake. From the kitchen, I could hear voices, laughter punctuating whatever conversation flowed between my daughter and her husband. I moved forward slowly, rehearsing my entrance in my mind. Surprise. Too cliché. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Too saccharine. Maybe a simple hello would do. I was about to round the corner when I heard my name. Mom called again this morning. Laurel's voice was clear, carrying that sharp edge I had started to notice recently. 3rd time this week. What did she want this time? Kent's voice was slightly bored. I froze, the cake box growing heavier in my hands. Same as always, Laurel replied. To talk about nothing for an hour. To remind me that she's alone. To make me feel guilty for living my own life. My breath caught in my throat. I should have left then, turned around, and walked away with my dignity intact. But my feet were glued to the floor, my body unwilling to follow the command to retreat. At least she didn't invite herself for your birthday, Kent said. Remember last year? She stayed for 5 days. Don't remind me. I had to hide in our bedroom just to get some peace. Each word landed like a physical blow. I stood motionless, rain dripping from my coat onto their pristine hardwood floor. She mentioned something about maybe visiting soon, Laurel continued. I told her we were busy with work. Good, Kent replied. The last thing we need is her showing up unannounced. The irony, if it weren't so devastating, might have been amusing. I imagined them in the kitchen. Laurel at the island, chopping vegetables. Kent stirring something on the stove. Their domestic routine. More a performance than a genuine display of affection. Then Laurel's voice cut through my thoughts. God, I hope she crashes. My heart stopped. Then we wouldn't have to deal with her constant calls. Kent laughed. Or at least get lost. Give us a weekend without the guilt trips. Their laughter mixed together, bitter and sweet, poison and honey. The cake box trembled in my hands. My daughter, the same child I had nursed through chickenpox, driven to midnight emergency rooms, rescued from science projects due the next day, and mended broken hearts with ice cream, had just wished for my death. And Kent, the man who promised to honor the family he was marrying into, had laughed. I don't remember deciding to move. My body simply carried me forward into the kitchen where they stood. Laurel still chopping, Kent still stirring, just as I had imagined. When they saw me, their faces drained of color. Shock replaced any trace of familiarity. Their mouths opened in synchronized circles of horror. Time seemed to stop. I could see the realization wash over them, their minds racing to calculate how much I had heard and how much damage control would be needed. I saw Laurel's hand rise to her throat, a gesture she'd inherited from me. It was something we both did when words failed us, a silent expression of disbelief. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I simply placed the cake box on the counter, turned, and walked back out the door I'd entered through. Mom. Laurel called after me, her voice cracking with desperation. Mom, wait. But I was already in the rain again, moving faster than my old knees should allow. Back to my car. Back to the road that had brought me here. Birdie, please. Kent's voice joined the chorus of my name. We didn't mean. I closed the car door on their apologies, turned the key in the ignition, and let my hand stop shaking. It was strange how clarity can arrive in the moment everything falls apart. The windshield wipers swept away the rain, their persistence metronomic. Left, right, truth, love, indifference. In my rearview mirror, I saw them standing in the driveway. Laurel with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, Kent's hand on her shoulder. They looked small, insignificant, dwindling as I drove away. I didn't look back again. Has someone ever betrayed your trust in a way you couldn't ignore? Subscribe and share your story in the comments. Sometimes, the hardest part is driving away from what hurts us. The rain seemed to intensify as I reached the highway, as if nature itself were providing cover for my retreat. My clothes clung to my skin, cold and uncomfortable, but the discomfort felt distant, secondary to the hollowness expanding in my chest. The passenger seat, now empty of its precious cargo, seemed to echo in the gray afternoon light. My phone began to buzz in my purse once, twice, then continuously as texts and calls poured in. I didn't need to check the screen to know it was Laurel, frantically trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. I switched it to silent without a second glance. Where does one go when home is revealed as an illusion? When the love you've counted on proves conditional, and the relationship you've nurtured turns out to be a mere obligation. The highway stretched before me, a ribbon of possibilities, none of them leading back to the truth I thought I knew just an hour ago. I drove aimlessly until the gas light came on. The persistent glow, a reminder that even in emotional crisis, practical matters demand attention. A motel appeared through the rain, one of those roadside establishments with outdated decor and questionable cleanliness. The flickering vacancy sign seemed like an omen, offering not just shelter, but anonymity. The room smelled of disinfectant and stale cigarettes. The floral bedspread was a poor imitation of cheerfulness. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my damp clothes, staring at the wallpaper until my eyes unfocused. For the first time since overhearing those devastating words, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. This wasn't just about a cruel comment made in frustration. This was the culmination of years of subtle dismissals, of increasingly transparent excuses, of a relationship that had been wilting while I continued to water it with hope. My daughter hadn't simply rejected my visit. She had rejected my place in her life. My phone buzzed 17 times that night. I didn't answer. Morning arrived through the thin motel curtains. I had slept in my clothes, too numb to care about comfort. My phone had finally fallen silent around 2 a.m. The battery drained from constant notifications. In the harsh bathroom light, I barely recognized my reflection. My eyes looked hollow, the lines around my mouth deeper than before. I showered and dressed in yesterday's clothes, then checked my phone. 27 missed calls. 42 text messages. Mom, please call us back. You misunderstood, Bertie. Kent's voice crackled through the phone. We were just joking around. It wasn't about you. Laurel's voice joined in, urgent and pleading. Mom, I'm worried. Where are you? I couldn't bring myself to respond, but I could hear them. Kent, then Laurel, each trying to explain away their words. This isn't fair, Kent said, his voice laced with frustration. You're scaring me, Bertie. At least let us know you're safe. Laurel, if you don't call back, I'm going to have to call the police, I said, though it was a bluff. I knew Laurel would never risk the explanation for why her elderly mother had fled in distress. I flipped the phone face down, considering my options. I could go home, pretend it never happened. I could confront them, demand an apology. Or I could do something entirely different. This wasn't the first time I had been let down by them. There had been smaller betrayals I had brushed aside. Like the Christmas they canceled their visit, claiming Ken had the flu, but then posted photos of themselves at a ski resort in Vermont. Or the weekend when my toiletries were moved from the guest bathroom to a closet before their friends arrived. The graduation gift I sent to Ken's niece, only to receive a thank you card addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Richards, as if it came from strangers. Moments I had dismissed as oversights had now formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Instead of heading back home or to Laurel's, I entered a new address into my GPS. A residence in White Plains, close enough to retrieve what I needed from home, yet far enough from Laurel to give me the space I needed. A place where I could think clearly, free from the weight of routine. My phone buzzed again. Not Laurel, not Kent, but Theta. Bertie, thank God. I've been calling since yesterday. Are you all right? Laurel called me, said something happened. I took a deep breath. Theta. I heard my daughter say she hoped I would crash my car and die. A silence followed, stretching into 3 heartbeats. Where are you? Theta's voice was tight, controlled anger simmering beneath her calm tone. Heading to White Plains. Good. Don't go back there. Come home when you're ready. I've got that bottle of Glenfiddich Harold gave me before he died. I think it's time we opened it. For the first time since walking into Laurel's kitchen, a small smile tugged at my lips. Not happiness, no. That would come much later, if ever. But a recognition of a truth I had overlooked. I might have lost a daughter, but I wasn't alone. I'll be home in a few days, I said. Keep the scotch cold. That's not how you drink scotch, you heathen, Theta quipped, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt a sense of normalcy settle in. The familiar banter, the connection, it was like solid ground beneath my feet. I disconnected the call and continued driving. The highway stretched out before me, an open road with no clear destination, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't quite ready to answer the questions it held. The rain had left everything washed clean, the world refreshed in a way I couldn't yet feel. But somewhere between the hurt and the horizon, a small, determined part of me began to think about what might come next. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but something else. 3 days at the residence gave me something I hadn't experienced in years. Solitude, without loneliness. No phone calls to answer, no appearances to maintain. I bought new clothes at a nearby mall, practical items. Nothing like the floral dresses Laurel always suggested would brighten my look. I silenced my phone, except for calls from Theta, who kept me updated on my house and my cat, Mr. Darcy. You know they came here, right? Theta told me during our nightly call. Laurel and Kent knocked on your door, then mine when they realized you weren't home. What did you tell them? That you were safe and would contact them when ready. Theta's voice turned dry. Kent tried that charm thing he does. I'm old, not stupid. On the 4th morning of my time away, I called my bank. I'd like information about accounts where I'm listed as a guarantor, I said after verifying my identity. The customer service representative hesitated. Do you mean joint accounts, Mrs. Matt? The bank representative asked. No, I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Accounts where I provided financial backing, credit cards, loans, anything where my assets are being used as security. What followed was a revelation far more painful than overhearing Laurel's cruel comment. For credit cards, with a combined limit of $75,000, each guaranteed by me. A personal loan for $30,000 taken out 2 years ago. A home equity guarantee on their house. And when were these arrangements made? I asked, keeping my voice even. The oldest credit account was opened 8 years ago, the representative answered. The most recent was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when Laurel had called me, crying about Kent's business struggles. I had offered to send money, but she refused, saying, "We don't need charity, Mom. Just some moral support." What she really meant was that my signature was worth more than my sympathy. After the bank, I called Harold's old investment advisor. "Mrs. Matt, what a pleasure." "It's been what? 5 years at least," he said when he answered. "I need a complete accounting of my assets. Everything Harold left. Everything I've acquired since," I replied. He emailed the summary that afternoon. The Colonial in Millbrook, now worth 3 times what we had paid for it. Harold's life insurance, which I had invested rather than spent. My teacher's pension, stock holdings that had grown steadily through careful management. Family heirlooms, including my mother's sapphire ring and Harold's grandfather's pocket watch collection. In total, just over $1.9 million. Almost enough for the beachfront property in Rhode Island that Laurel and Ken had been saving for while claiming they couldn't afford plane tickets to visit me for Christmas. The beach house. The final piece clicked into place when I called Kent's mother, Martha. We had always maintained a cordial but distant relationship. "Bertie, how lovely you're calling about the beach house. I know Laurel is so excited." "The beach house." I kept my voice neutral. "The one they're closing on next month?" I asked. "Yes, that one. The loan from his father, and I really helped make it happen. Though I understand you're contributing as well." I wasn't, at least not knowingly, but I was starting to understand exactly what role my financial stability played in their lives. That evening, I sat on the hotel bed, surrounded by printouts and notes, constructing a timeline of financial and emotional manipulation so methodical it could only have been deliberate. Each withdrawal from my emotional bank account had corresponded with a withdrawal from my financial one. Each canceled visit had come with a new request for support. Each dismissal of my place in their lives had been followed by an expansion of my role in their financial planning. I thought of Harold, how carefully he had built our security, how proud he had been to leave me provided for. "Take care of Laurel," he had said in those final days, "but don't let her take advantage of your heart." He had seen what I had refused to acknowledge. In the hotel mirror, I no longer saw just a foolish old woman who had been blind to betrayal. I saw the shadow of someone stronger, someone who had raised a child alone during Harold's long military deployments, someone who had earned a master's degree at 40 while working full-time, someone who had faced cancer with more courage than she now faced family dysfunction. I made one final call that night to Harriet McGill, my bridge partner for 15 years and the most ruthless estate attorney in 3 counties. "I need to see you," I said when she answered. "It's about my will." "Is this about Laurel?" Harriet asked, her voice sharp as always. "Yes," I replied. "And about me." "About time," she said. Thursday, 10 a.m. in my office. When I hung up the phone, I felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't the familiar ache of betrayal or the emptiness of grief. Instead, there was a cool, clear certainty that settled in. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, and it began with the woman in the mirror. Harriet's office had coastal views that were almost too pretty to be real, and furniture too uncomfortable to linger in. The space, much like Harriet herself, discouraged weakness. At 72, she still wore flame red hair and shoes that added 3 inches to her already imposing height. "You look different," she said instead of greeting me with a simple hello. "I am different," I replied. She nodded once, gestured to a chair, and said, "Tell me." So I did. I told her everything, from the grueling 9-hour drive to the overheard conversation to the painful financial discoveries. Harriet took notes without interruption, her expression unreadable, even when I revealed the most gut-wrenching details. "And now," she asked when I finished, "I want to change my will. All of it. And I need advice on removing my financial support without exposing myself to liability." Harriet's smile was brief, but genuine. "I've been waiting years for you to say those words. Let's start with the will." For the next 2 hours, we reconstructed my estate plan. The house on Maple Street, my investment portfolio, and all my financial assets would be donated to the Millbrook Women's Shelter, where I had volunteered after Harold's death. My personal items would be distributed among friends, with specific bequests for Theta and other neighbors who had shown genuine care. And for Laurel? Harriet asked, pen poised that I thought carefully before answering. My recipe box, my diaries, so she can read about the mother she dismissed and the life she didn't value. Harriet made a note. Deliciously petty. I approve. Next came the financial disentanglement. Harriet brought in her partner, who specialized in banking law, and together we crafted letters to remove my guarantees from Laurel and Kent's credit accounts, effective immediately. We notified their mortgage company that I was rescinding the secondary guarantee on their home loan. We closed joint accounts I had forgotten existed and opened new ones solely in my name. They'll feel this within days, Harriet's partner warned. Credit limits may be reduced, possibly to 0. Loan terms may be reconsidered. I understand, I said, signing another form with steady hands. The beach house closing will almost certainly fall through without your financial backing, Harriet added. I remembered Laurel's voice. God, I hope she crashes. The casual cruelty of it all. I thought of their laughter, the indifference that came from treating me as a resource rather than a person. So be it, I replied. Before I left Harriet's office, I made one more decision. I called Martha Richards. I wanted to let you know I've removed my financial guarantees from Laurel and Kent's accounts, I said without preamble. I don't understand, Martha replied, confusion in her voice. What guarantees? The ones they've been using to secure credit and loans, including, I suspect, the loan for the beach house. Silence followed. Then Martha spoke. Bertie, they told us you were contributing half the down payment. That's why we agreed to loan them the other half. A bitter laugh escaped me. Well, I'm not and I won't be. You should know before the closing. That evening, back in my hotel room, I felt neither triumph nor guilt. Instead, there was a strange, calm clarity. I ordered room service, a luxury I rarely allowed myself, and ate while watching the sunset over the White Plains skyline. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Calls from unknown numbers that I suspected were Kent, trying every possible phone to reach me. Finally, I answered one. What have you done? Kent's voice was tight, panic evident rather than concern. Hello, Kent. I'm well. Thank you for asking, I replied, though there was no warmth in my voice. The bank called about all our credit cards. They're saying the accounts are being restructured because you've removed your guarantee. The mortgage company, too. And Martha called about the beach house. Yes, I spoke with her, I continued. Interesting that you told your parents I was contributing to the down payment when we never discussed such a thing. It was a misunderstanding, Kent said quickly, the words stumbling out in an attempt to regain control of the conversation. Look, we need to talk about this. Whatever you think you heard that day, I said, cutting him off. I know exactly what I heard. And what I've learned since then makes it clear it wasn't a one-time lapse, but a pattern. Bertie, please. No more, Kent, I interrupted, my voice firm. No more manipulations. No more guarantees. No more financing a life that excludes me, except when my credit score is needed. I paused for a moment before adding, give Laurel a message from me. The woman she hoped would crash has finally woken up. I hung up without waiting for his response, blocking his number immediately. Then, I opened my laptop and booked a flight home for the following day. 9 hours of driving had brought me to this revelation. A 90-minute flight would carry me toward resolution. As I packed my new clothes into my old suitcase, I felt neither young nor old, neither victorious nor defeated, but something else entirely. Free. Free of the illusions about my daughter's love. Free of the financial entanglements that had bound me to people who wished me harm. Free to rewrite the final chapters of my life without obligation to those who had relinquished any claim to my heart. The rain that had accompanied my journey to Laurel's had given way to clear skies, as though the universe itself approved of my newfound clarity. At 78, I had finally learned that some storms aren't meant to be endured. They're meant to wash away what no longer deserves to stand. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between peace and family? I asked, the words almost leaving my lips before I caught myself. Subscribe and like if this resonates with you. At what point would you have drawn the line? Comment below and follow through to where the consequences begin. Home felt different when I returned. The familiar rooms of my colonial house held the same furniture, the same photographs, and the same view of the maple tree Harold had planted the year Laurel was born. But I moved through these spaces as someone new, a woman who had finally recognized her own worth. Mr. Darcy greeted me with his usual indifference, then settled onto my lap for the evening, as though ensuring I wouldn't disappear again. Theta brought over the promised scotch and sat with me on the back porch as twilight settled over the garden. "They've been calling me daily," she said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "Laurel sounds less worried and more angry now," I replied. "The financial notifications must have started arriving," I added with a knowing smile. Theta's eyebrows rose. "What exactly did you do?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. I told her everything. The changed will, the removed guarantees, the beach house revelation. When I finished, Theta raised her glass in silent toast. "Harold would be proud," she said simply. The first letter arrived 3 days after my return. It was on thick cream stationery, and Laurel's precise handwriting adorned the envelope. It was formal in a way our relationship had never been. "Dear Mom, I don't know what's happening. You won't answer our calls. The bank says our credit limit has been reduced because you're no longer serving as our guarantor. Kent's mother says you called her asking about that loan we took from them last year. Whatever you think you heard that day, you misunderstood. We were joking. It was just dark humor after a stressful week. You know how Kent and I talk sometimes. Please call us. We're worried about you. Love, Laurel." There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just gaslighting wrapped in concern, financial panic disguised as filial worry. I folded the letter carefully, placing it in the box where I kept Laurel's childhood drawings, adding this final piece of evidence to the archive of our relationship. That evening, Kent called from yet another new number. "The beach house closing is next Friday," he said, skipping any greeting. "The sellers won't extend again. We need the guarantee reinstated by Monday. Hello, Kent. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Bertie, be reasonable. This is our dream home. We've been working toward this for years." "Interesting," I replied calmly. "During those same years, you told me you couldn't afford plane tickets to visit for Christmas." Silence. "Then that was different. Travel during the holidays is expensive, and $1.5 million beach house isn't." "Goodbye, Kent," I said, hanging up without hesitation. I felt neither satisfaction nor guilt, only a quiet certainty that I was finally standing on solid ground. The next week brought escalating desperation. Letters from Laurel arrived daily, each one shifting from attempts at reconciliation to urgent requests for financial help. Kent's voice messages alternated between charm and thinly veiled accusations. Even their friends, people I'd met briefly at functions where I was introduced as Laurel's mom, suddenly reached out, concerned about my well-being. Their mortgage company sent a formal letter to my home address, asking for verification of my withdrawal as a secondary guarantor. Their credit card companies did the same. Each envelope in my mailbox confirmed how thoroughly they had entangled me in their financial mess without my informed consent. On Wednesday, I received a text from an unknown number. "Mom, please. We're going to lose the beach house. All that money down the drain. Is that what you want?" I didn't respond, but the message made something clear. Even now, after everything, Laurel's concern was for the house, not for the relationship. Not once in her messages had she addressed the cruel words I'd overheard, except to dismiss them as a joke I had misunderstood. Friday morning, I met Zoe, Laurel's best friend since college, at a cafe in town. I had called her. She hadn't reached out to me. "Thank you for coming," I said as we settled with our coffee. Zoe looked uncomfortable. "Lo's worried sick about you, Bertie. She says you misunderstood something and now you're punishing her." I smiled. "Did she tell you what I misunderstood?" "She said you overheard a private conversation and took it the wrong way." "I heard my daughter hope I would crash my car and die," I said calmly. "Tell me, Zoe, how should I have taken that?" Her eyes widened. "She didn't say that. She couldn't have." "She did." And her husband laughed. I took a sip of my tea. Did she also tell you they've been using me as a credit guarantor for years? That they borrowed money from Kent's parents for a down payment on a beach house, while telling me they couldn't afford to visit for Christmas? Zoe's silence spoke volumes. I'm not meeting you to complain, I continued. I'm meeting you to give you this. I slid an envelope across the table. It's an invitation to my 79th birthday party next month. I'd like you to come. Laurel and Kent aren't invited. As Zoe left, visibly shaken, I felt neither vindication nor guilt. Just the quiet certainty that once truth is spoken, it creates its own justice. That afternoon, I received a text from Martha Richards. The beach house closing has been canceled. I think you should know they're blaming you to everyone who will listen. I texted back, thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry they put you in this position. Her response came quickly. Don't be. George and I are beginning to see them more clearly now. We should have listened to you years ago. Perhaps that was the first real victory. Not the financial consequences I had set in motion, but this small acknowledgement that I hadn't been wrong all along. For weeks after leaving the cake, I received another call from Laurel. This time I answered. Mom, she said, her voice breaking with what sounded like relief. Finally, we've been so worried. Have you? I asked, keeping my tone light. Of course we have. You disappeared. You changed your financial arrangements without telling us. You've been talking to our friends behind our backs. I heard what you said, Laurel, I interrupted. About hoping I would crash. About wanting a weekend without my guilt trips. Silence stretched between us. That was just, she began, but I cut her off. Don't, I said. Don't insult me by lying now. She started crying. Not the manipulative tears I had seen so often in recent years, but what sounded like genuine sobs. We didn't mean it. We were just stressed. You call so often and you always sound so lonely and we feel so guilty. That's the problem, I said. You see my love as a burden, my calls as an obligation, my presence as something to endure. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither was wishing me dead, I replied. But here we are. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Nothing. I paused. No, I said firmly. That's the point. I don't want anything from you anymore. Not your time, not your attention, not your pretend affection. I've changed my will, removed my financial support, and started building a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for crumbs from my only child. You can't just cut us off, her voice rose, panic edging in. The beach house closing failed. Our credit cards are maxed out. Ken's parents are asking questions about loans we can't repay right now. And there it was, no concern for me, just concern for what I could provide. Is that why you're calling, Laurel? I asked quietly. To get the financial tap turned back on? No, she protested, but too quickly. I want to fix our relationship. I love you, Mom. Do you? I asked. Because love requires respect, and respect requires honesty. You haven't been honest with me in years. About your feelings, about your finances, about my place in your life. That's not true, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. When's the last time you visited without asking for something? When's the last time you called just to talk, not to manage my expectations or set up some boundary? When's the last time you treated me like a person you value, rather than an obligation you manage? Her silence spoke volumes. I won't be your bank anymore, Laurel, I continued. And I won't be your emotional punching bag either. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on new terms, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and complete honesty. And if I can't meet these terms, her voice hardened, the victim facade slipping, then we don't have a relationship. It's that simple. You would choose being right over being my mother, she asked as though wounded. After everything you've always said about family coming first. Family does come first, I agreed. But what you and Ken have shown me isn't family. It's exploitation dressed up as obligation. I deserve better. This is about the money, isn't it? She said suddenly, the words sharp with accusation. You're punishing us financially because your feelings got hurt. No, Laurel, I replied calmly. This is about consequences. For perhaps the first time in your adult life, your actions toward me have real consequences. The financial part is just the most tangible aspect. Ken says you've always been manipulative, she said, a last desperate jab. That you use guilt to control me. I laughed. genuinely amused. Says the man who convinced me to guarantee loans for a beach house you told me you couldn't afford. The irony would be delicious if it weren't so sad. So that's it? 30 years of being my mother, erased because of one comment you overheard. Not erased, Laurel, I said softly. Transformed. I'm still your mother. I still love the child you were and the woman you could be. But I no longer accepted the role you'd assigned me, the financial security blanket and emotional scapegoat. If you want a relationship with me, it will need to be built on truth, starting with acknowledging what I heard that day. And if I apologize, Laurel asked, her voice faltering, if I say I'm sorry for what you heard, will you reinstate the guarantees? Help with the beach house? Even now, she couldn't separate our relationship from financial benefit. Even now, an apology was a transaction, not a step toward healing. Goodbye, Laurel, I said softly. When you're ready to talk about us without mentioning money, you know where to find me. I hung up before she could respond, feeling neither triumph nor defeat, but something far more profound, peace. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without fear of abandonment, because in truth, I had already been abandoned in every way that mattered. Outside my window, spring had arrived. While I wasn't looking, the maple tree Harold had planted was budding, green promises unfurling toward the sun. Soon, it would provide shade for the garden I had neglected last summer, too busy trying to maintain a relationship that existed only in my hope. This year, I would plant tomatoes again, and perhaps something new. Blueberries or that asparagus Theta had been encouraging me to try. Plants that take years to establish, but once rooted, will produce for decades. At 78, I still had time to grow something lasting, something real. 6 weeks after the rainstorm, I hosted my birthday party in the garden of my Millbrook home. Not the excessive celebration Laurel had always pushed for. You should rent the country club, Mom. Make it special, but something genuinely reflective of who I am. Theta was there with her infamous potato salad. Harriet came, her flame-red hair visible from 3 houses away. My bridge club, my book group, the women I'd volunteered with at the library. People who had been relegated to the periphery of my life, while I centered those who valued me least. And Zoe came, having chosen our honest conversation over decades of friendship with Laurel. She tried to make me choose sides. She admitted as we arranged cucumber sandwiches on my mother's silver platters. Said I was betraying her by coming today. And yet here you are, I observed. Here I am, she agreed. It turns out loyalty has limits, especially when someone expects you to ignore cruelty. We ate carrot cake, not the recipe I'd left on Laurel's counter, but a new one I'd created with ginger, orange zest, and a hint of cardamom. I served it on my good china, the set I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed important enough to warrant their use. Harriet raised her glass as the evening light turned golden across my lawn. To Bertie, who at 79 has more courage than most people have her age. To new beginnings, Theta added. And to knowing your own worth, I finished smiling. I looked around at these faces, some known for decades, others more recent additions to my life, and felt something expand in my chest. This was family chosen and authentic. This was connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The texts from Laurel still came, less frequent now, but no less calculating. Mom, the mortgage company is asking questions. And Kent's car needs repairs we can't afford right now. And finally, I don't understand why you're punishing us financially for an offhand comment. I didn't respond. Some lessons can only be learned through experience, and Laurel's education in consequences was still ongoing. Instead, I focused on rebuilding the life I'd put on hold while waiting for my daughter's approval that I rejoined the library board I had left when Laurel suggested it. She'd said it took too much of my time away from family. I also signed up for watercolor classes at the community center, something I'd wanted to try ever since Harold died, but never prioritized. Most significantly, I began volunteering at the Millbrook Women's Shelter 3 afternoons a week. Many of the residents were about the same age as Laurel, women rebuilding their lives after relationships that had left them diminished instead of empowered. I helped with resumes, practiced interview skills with them, and sometimes simply listened as they processed how they'd found themselves in situations they never imagined. One young woman, as we worked on her job application, said, "You don't seem like most of the older volunteers." You get it? How someone can love you and hurt you at the same time. "I've had some experience with that," I replied. In these women's stories of manipulation and gaslighting, I recognized shadows of my own experience. The circumstances were different in degree, but not in kind. When the shelter director learned that I had changed my will to benefit the organization, she insisted on taking me to lunch. "That's quite a gift, Bertie. May I ask why?" I told her about Laurel, about the overheard conversation, about realizing how thoroughly I had been used. "So, this is about punishing your daughter?" she asked, not judging, just clarifying. "No," I said after considering. "It's about honoring what matters. These women are doing the hard work of rebuilding their lives with dignity. My money should go where it will foster strength, not enable entitlement." By autumn, I had established a rhythm to my days that felt both new and familiar, like returning to a version of myself I had set aside years ago. I planted the blueberry bushes Theta had recommended and joined a hiking group for seniors that met weekly to explore local trails. Laurel sent a birthday card, store-bought with a generic message, and a gift card to a restaurant chain. No personal note. No acknowledgement of our last conversation. I sent a polite thank you text, maintaining the boundary I had established, cordiality without capitulation. The financial consequences continued to unfold for her and Kent. Through Martha, with whom I now had coffee monthly, I learned they downsized to a smaller house. Unable to maintain the tutor without my financial backing, Ken had taken a second job. Laurel had started selling real estate, something she'd once dismissed as beneath her education level. I took no pleasure in their struggles, but I recognized their necessity. For too long, I had protected them from the natural outcomes of their choices. Now reality was providing what my love had prevented, the chance for them to grow through adversity. In November, as the first snow dusted my maple tree, Zoe called with news. "Laurel's pregnant," she said. "She's about 3 months along. I thought you should know." I sat with this information for several days, my feelings tangled like yarn I couldn't unravel. A grandchild, something I had wanted but stopped expecting as Laurel neared 50. A new person who would exist beyond the complications of our relationship. A life coming into being, even as others were being redesigned. After careful consideration, I sent Laurel a card. Not a text, not an email, but a proper card on fine stationery. I wrote simply, "I've heard your news." A child changes everything, sometimes by their presence, sometimes by their absence. I wish you the wisdom to value what matters most. If you ever want to discuss a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial entanglement, my door remains open. With love. She didn't respond, but I hadn't expected her to. Some seeds take time to germinate if they grow at all. 6 months after that rainy drive to Connecticut, I sat in my kitchen, making a shopping list for Thanksgiving dinner. I had invited Theta, Harriet, and several new friends from the shelter and the hiking group, people who had become my chosen family during my season of reinvention. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Mrs. Matt. This is Dr. Leland from Hartford Memorial. I have your daughter, Laurel, here. She's asked me to call you." My heart stuttered. "Is she all right?" "She's stable. She experienced some bleeding and was concerned about the pregnancy. We've run tests and everything looks fine, but we're keeping her overnight for observation. Her husband is traveling for work, and she asked if I would call you." "Thank you for letting me know," I said, my mind already calculating the drive time to Hartford. She also asked, the doctor hesitated, then continued more softly. "She asked if you would come. She said to tell you she's sorry, but only if you meant what you wrote in your card." I closed my eyes briefly, the weight of the moment sinking in. "Please tell her I'll be there in 3 hours." The drive to Hartford was nothing like that journey 6 months before. No rain, no cake, no anticipation of joy or subsequent devastation. Just clear November sunshine and the steady hum of my car on the highway. carrying me toward a conversation 6 months and 30 years in the making. Laurel looked small in the hospital bed, her hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her abdomen. When she saw me, tears filled her eyes, not the manipulative kind I'd grown wary of, but something clearer, more genuine. "You came," she said simply. "You asked," I replied, taking the chair beside her bed. We sat in silence for a moment, the beeping of monitors and distant hospital sounds filling the space between us. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said finally, her voice small, "since the beach house fell through. At first, it was just to deal with the stress, but," she looked down at her hands, "it's become more than that." I waited, allowing her the space to continue. "She asked me questions no one's ever asked, about why I resented your calls, why I felt such obligation rather than connection, why I could say such cruel things about someone who'd only shown me love." Laurel looked up, meeting my eyes. I didn't have good answers. "And now," she trailed off, then continued, "now, I'm beginning to understand that I've been punishing you for years. For being alone after Dad died. For needing me when I wanted independence. For representing a simpler life when I was trying so hard to build something impressive." Her voice cracked. "For loving me unconditionally when I couldn't love myself that way." It wasn't a complete reckoning. Such things take years, not months, but it was a beginning, a seed breaking through hard ground. "The financial stuff," she continued, "losing the beach house, downsizing meant having to take that second job. It's been hard, really hard. But my therapist says," she gave a small, watery laugh. "She says it's the best thing that could have happened to us, that we were building a life on appearances rather than authentic connection." "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think she's right," Laurel said quietly. "And I think you knew that all along." Laurel reached for my hand tentatively. "I'm not asking for money, Mom, or guarantees, or anything material. I'd like to try again to build something real between us before this baby comes." I looked at her, taking in her words. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start, a small seed of healing, planted in the soil of our shared history, starting to take root. I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. "I'd like that, too," I replied softly. We didn't solve everything that day in the hospital. True healing isn't a moment. It's a process, full of setbacks and small victories. In the months that followed, we created new patterns. Weekly coffees where financial matters were explicitly off limits. Occasional family dinners where conversation went deeper than surface pleasantries. Kent struggled more with the new arrangement. His charm, which had always been a currency that quickly lost value when it couldn't be exchanged for material benefit, was still in play. But he was trying, if only for Laurel's sake, and for the child they were expecting. As for me, I maintained the life I had built during our estrangement. The women's shelter remained in my will, though I added a trust for my grandchild's education. My friendships deepened, and my blueberry bushes took root. I continued painting watercolors, hiking local trails, and baking new recipes, each one entirely my own creation. Some might call what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as consequences. At 79, I had finally learned that love without respect isn't love at all, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop pretending. The rain falls differently now, not as a storm to endure, but as a reminder that even the hardest things eventually clear, leaving the world washed clean and ready for whatever comes next. The carrot cake I bake these days has less sugar and more spice. Like me, perhaps. Like the truth that finally set us all free. This morning, as I mixed batter for a new recipe, my phone lit up with a message from Laurel. An ultrasound image appeared on the screen, a tiny profile in black and white, with the simple text, "Your granddaughter. He has your nose." I touched the screen gently. This window into a future I hadn't been sure I'd live to see. Then I returned to my baking, folding in fresh ingredients, creating something that had never existed before, much like the life I was building at 79. One honest conversation, one boundary, one choice at a time. The timer rang. It was time to take the cake out of the oven. Time to move forward. Eyes open, heart cautious but not closed. Time to accept that some journeys don't begin with a 9-hour drive through rain, but with the courage to say enough. I am worth more than this. We all are. At what age did you finally learn to value yourself above others' expectations? It's never too late to set boundaries and start again. Whether you're 29, 59, or 79, Bird's journey reminds us that self-respect isn't selfish, it's essential. Share the story if you've ever had to walk away to find yourself. Follow for more tales of resilience, reinvention, and the quiet courage it takes to begin again. Remember, you're never too old to bake a new recipe for your life.